Hey guys, welcome to the channel. As you see in the thumbnail, what if issei time travel? Before we start the video, please hit the subscribe button and like the video as well. Also share this video with your friends. Let's start the video. Issei POV. Shilba, he's finally dead. Rias, my comrades, I can go back to them now, right? Partner. Hold on. I could feel the pain disappearing. Samael's curse is disappearing. That's good, right? Issei, Azazel, and the others are going to open the dragon gate. You have to make it then so we can go home. I know, Shrag. I wonder, though, what's the first thing I should do? You will never make it, said Offeyes in a monotone voice. My eyes moved weakly and I could see her out of the corner of my vision. Of course, I will. I breathed out, weakly. I still haven't taken Rias' virginity, or Akeno's, and I need to protect Asia from those lecherous bastards. Those girls mean a lot to you, said Offeyes, plainly. I smiled, weakly, as I remembered their faces before coughing up a blob of blood. I also have dreams, goals. I said, weakly. Offeyes nudged me on, seeming curious. Saraorg, Kiba, Saji, Vala, I have to surpass them, my rivals. I have to become the ultimate pawn. I even want to master the dividing gear. Of course, my greatest dream is to create a harem. My image of Offeyes began to blur and I couldn't feel anything anymore. I was still laying on a chunk of the ground which was floating in the dimensional gap. Hey, Offeyes, you don't seem like a bad person, so why did you create the Chaos Brigade? I asked, wondering what someone like her had in mind. I could just barely make out a puzzled expression from my blurred view of Offeyes and I coughed up some more blood before continuing. Asia, Irina, you saved them. I was merely returning the favor, said Offeyes, plainly. They are some of my important friends. I came to save you, out of thanks for saving them. Why did you join them? I said, weakly. Everything was starting to feel cold. I created the Chaos Brigade so that I could receive aid with my goal. Everyone who joined was forced to swear an oath to aid me in defeating Great Red, explained Offeyes. So, when Great Red was defeated, you would just leave? I asked. Offeyes responded with a simple yes and I continued. They would never keep their oath, they just took advantage of you, and your snakes. It doesn't matter to me as long as they are able to beat Great Red so I can return home, said Offeyes while shrugging. I smiled and could feel the blood running down the side of my face. The dimensional gap means a lot to you, I said, weakly. That's why I came to the Sekuruti's home. I believed there was something there that could help me fulfill my dream and discover the secret behind the true dragon and heavenly dragon that lies within you, which would also help me find the reason why I, myself, exist, explained Offeyes, confusing me. I was never really good with all the complicated explanations. I understand, I began, smiling. Offeyes was so pure and the Chaos Brigade just took advantage of her purity. She was just a figurehead to the organization. I began to feel sleepy and my eyes drooped a bit. Hey, Offeyes, do you want to become my friend? Friend, said Offeyes in a surprised tone. How would I benefit from being your friend? I could be someone you could talk to, like about your home. I said. I see. That would be fun, said Offeyes in her usual monotone voice. Hey, Offeyes, when we go back, come and live with me, and the others, I said, smiling, weakly. With the Sekuriti? Asked Offeyes, curiously. I nodded while smiling and I could just hear her get up and walk over to me. I would very much like that, but you won't make it, said Offeyes, kneeling next to my head. My brow scrunched up and I muttered I have to several times, but she continued. You won't make it until the gate opens. My life began to flash before my eyes and frowned. Was this the end? Issei, partner, I could hear Drake crying. This wasn't his usual grief cry from the Oppai incidents but a true cry of sadness. You were the best partner I ever had. You made the most impossible things possible. Even with the grief your perverted nature gave me, you never ceased to amaze me. Please don't die, partner, I don't want to leave your side. I can tell you are greatly loved by everyone, Sekuriti. Even Drake. I know everyone would be sad if you died. You are a really nice guy, though perverted, said Offeyes. Call me Issei, since we're friends now. I said, weakly. Issei, my friend, she said, gently. She leaned in close enough that I could feel her breath on my face. Hey, issei, I have a question before you die. All right, I said. What if I said I could send you and Drake back 10 years with your current memories? Asked Office. I became confused by what she said. Back in time? Well, I kind of know. Well, I would get a lot stronger, take martial arts classes, and visit the yokai in Kyoto. I'd also visit a Keno's shrine, and meet all the people I could have met earlier. I said, thinking of all the people I might leave behind if I died. All right, said Office before hopping to her feet and stretching. I said huh, and she was unfazed by what I said. I'm sending you and Drake back now, are you ready? Office, do you know what will happen to you if you do that? I'll still exist in the past even I send your souls back then. This will be my first time performing such a spell and I know for a fact it will rebound. There is a high possibility those close to your heart will retain their memories of the future, said Office, calmly. Issei, are you ready for this? Yes. I said with as much energy as I could muster. All right, hey, Issei, will you really keep your promise to me, that is being my friend? Asked Office. I promise, I said before coughing up some more blood. I could just make out a smile on Office's face and magic circles appeared around her. And when the time comes, you will save me again, said Office, hopefully. I smiled and breathed out and of course before she smiled. Goodbye, Issei. I'll see you again, Office. I promise, I said, even weaker than prior. My consciousness finally drifted away but instead of the dark abyss I expected, a radiant light headed my way and lit up the darkness. Life point 1. Beep beep beep. I groaned as the alarm clock woke me from my sleep and I clutched my head. I had a painful headache. It must have been because of the alarm clock. I stretched my arm over to turn off my alarm clock, not bothering to open my eyes, but for some reason I couldn't reach it. I cracked my eyes open and sat up and reached over to my nightstand to turn off my alarm, annoyed that I had to deal with anything after just waking up. I yawned a stretch before I realized something. My room, it was just like before the Gremory family rebuilt it. What? What happened to my room? I asked, confused. Partner, said a familiar voice, awkwardly, in my head. Drake. At least something is normal. What's going on? Where's Rias and the rest? Partner, do you have a mirror in your room? You should probably go look in one, said Drake, awkwardly. I put on a confused expression but got up from my bed to look for a mirror. As I walked over to it I spoke. I don't really understand why I need to see a mirror, DDRY. I'm a mini-me. I shouted, jumping back after I saw my reflection. Office sent us back in time, if you remember. She sent us back 11 years, though. I don't really understand why one more year, explained Drake. I stared, wide-eyed, at the mirror. So I really did almost die after my fight with Shulba? Damn it. And the reason why it was 11 years, did something go wrong with the spell? I asked, hoping Drake knew something. She probably put too much power into the spell. It's not surprising since she said she had never done it before. Also, remember that she said some people might remember you, partner, said Drake. My eyes widened as I remembered Office's words. If they're close to my heart then there is a chance some people might remember the future. Meaning Rias and Akeno and Asia might remember me. Also, partner, there's something you should probably know. What is it, Drake? I asked, concerned by what he was going to say. Well, you're basically useless right now. Since your body is just a fragile human, you can't use balance breaker nor can you use any of the power you gained as a devil, explained Drake, causing me to slump down. Great, so I'm back to my useless, weak self. And after all the training I did as a devil. Well, on the bright side, you no longer get power from breasts. Ah, it's so refreshing to think about that. Oi, we beat a lot of enemies because of that, but at least now I won't have to put Drake through all that stress. I guess if that helps your health then I guess it's okay, I said as I sat down on my bed. Drake began to weep in happiness and I rolled my eyes. Yes. The curse of the Oppai dragon is gone. And Albion won't be the Katsuryu Ukao, either, said Drake as he sobbed, happily. I could hear someone's voice echo in the background and Drake's sobbing halted. Oi, shut up. Oppai dragon is gone, so stop with that, zoom zoom yan. Ah. It must be my senpais in the boosted gear. I should probably ask them for help since my body isn't strong enough to use the sacred gear. They could probably train me to use it. Issei. Hurry down for breakfast or your father is going to eat it all, shouted my mother from downstairs. I quickly changed and ran downstairs and found my breakfast sitting on the table while my father was reading his newspaper. Good morning, honey. Morning, Mom, Dad, I said as I began to eat my food. Anything planned for today, kiddo? I assume you're going to see Irina since she's leaving today, right? Asked my father, making my eyes go wide. That's right. Irina leaves the country today. I have to hurry or else I'm going to miss her. She might be one of the people who remembers me. I began to scarf down my food after remembering that and my mother scolded me. Issei. You are going to choke on your food. Eat slowly. You have plenty of time before Irina leaves, said my mother. I pouted and slowed down my pace until she was satisfied. Considering how your parents are acting, it seems they don't remember you, said Drake, causing me to sigh. I'm not surprised, I never really saw eye to eye with my parents after a certain day. After you became a pervert? Asked Drake. I grinned and replied with a simple yes, causing Drake to sigh in annoyance. Aside from seeing Irina, issei, you know that school is coming up soon, right? Is there anything you're planning on joining? I don't want you just lounging around after you get back, said my father. I paused my eating as I thought. I had planned on getting stronger, so I thought I'd maybe join kendo so I could properly use Ascalon, but I had yet to put a lot of thought into it. Partner, I have a suggestion, said Drake, catching my attention. Why don't you learn some kind of hand-to-hand combat? I'm sure there is some kind of class you could join. That's a great idea. I was always so useless when I couldn't use my balance breaker, and even while I used it, I didn't have any kind of fighting style. Sarayorg was one who showed that I had a particular weakness, not knowing any martial arts. I think I'm going to join one of the martial arts clubs, I said as I continued to eat. I peeked at my father to gauge his reaction, and he continued to look at the paper as he picked up his coffee. Martial arts? Oh, that sounds good. Very good, said my father, absent-mindedly. Just as he began to drink his coffee, he seemed to have processed my words and he spit it out all over my mother's face just as she was setting his food down. My face, screamed my mother before running over to the sink to splash some cold water on her face that was now burning from the hot coffee. Why you want to go into martial arts? Shouted my father in surprise, not even realizing what he had just done to his wife. You idiot. Do you know what you just did to your wife's face? Yeah, why? I asked, wondering what he was going to say with a scowl. You know that martial arts classes are expensive, right? Asked my father. I nodded and turned when I heard my mother sit down at the table. She glared over at my father and grinned, evilly, when a thought crossed her mind. I think it would be a great idea to let Issei join martial arts, said my mother. I sweat dropped, knowing she was just angry, but accepted it nonetheless. My father shrunk down in his chair and attempted to reject it with a, "We can't afford it," but my mother merely glared more fiercely. I could easily get part-time job, dear. Either ways, I have a friend who owns a dojo downtown. My father and I looked at my mother in surprise, and she explained that one of her high school friends married an old MMA fighter and they opened a dojo together. She even said that her friend had suggested Issei learn martial arts earlier, but she had refused because she thought it would be too violent. I finished up my breakfast and told my parents I was going to go see Irina and was out the door before they could respond. Well, that's out of the way, said Drake. Happy things went our way. I nodded and walked down the street to Irina's house and saw the huge moving truck parked in the driveway. Irina's parents and some of the movers were loading all sorts of things into the truck, and I ran over. Oh my, Issei-kun, said Irina's mother after she noticed me. She smiled, happy to see me, but continued to help load the truck. Did you come to see Irina before she leaves? Asked her father. I nodded, sharply, and he smiled. Why don't you go up to her room and play for a little while? We have plenty of time before we have to leave. I smiled and ran inside before quickly climbing the stairs. I walked over to her room and peeked inside to find Irina packing her things into bags. Hey, I said, smiling a bit bitterly. I was going to have to experience her leaving for the second time, and it made me kind of sad to think about. Irina turned around and smiled an equally bitter smile. Hey Issei-kun, said Irina, sadly. So? I said, sheepishly, not really knowing what to say. She smiled at me, sheepishly, also unaware of what to say, but I couldn't think of anything. Partner, aren't you going to find out if she remembers anything? Asked Drake. Of course. But where could I possibly start? Drake gave me a suggestion and I smiled. That might work. Hey, Irina, I had weird dream the other night, I said, going with Drake's plan. A dream, she said, confused by the strange topic. I nodded while smiling and she continued to listen. Yeah, in it you were an angel. You had white wings and a glowing halo, I explained. Irina stared at me for a moment and her face contorted in confusion. But I don't want to be an angel, she said, annoyed. Said Drake. Both of us were very confused by what she had said. But angels are pure and good. And you're becoming a follower of God just like your dad, I said, trying to convince her. But it's because of God that I'm moving away, said Irina with a sour expression. I just wanted to stay here and go to school with issei and I love it here. I don't want to leave. Irina had tears streaming down her face and I frowned. It seems she doesn't remember us after all, said Drake, calmly, and I sighed. This might have been a good thing. When Irina and I had reunited as friends in the present, she told me how she hated the private school she was forced to go to as a child. And my parents are even sending me to some private school when we get up there for Catholics. I just wanted to go to a normal school, said Irina, sniffling. Issei, said Drake. I know. I walked up to Irina and gently stroked the top of her head. Said Irina, confused. It's going to be okay, Irina, I said, smiling brightly. Remember that we heroes don't cry, no matter what. Heroes? What? Said Irina, confused. Yeah, we're heroes. And the number one rule for heroes is that they never cry. I said, a bright smile on my face. But I won't ever see you again, said Irina, sadly. I sighed and put out foreheads together. That's another rule for heroes. We never say goodbye, I said, a refreshing smile on my face. I could see her tears stop and my smile brightened. Heroes will always come back together. As long as we stay heroes we'll meet again, I promise. You pinky promise? Asked Irina before holding out her pinky. I smiled at her and grabbed her pinky with my own. Or cross my heart and hope to die, I said as I made an X shape on my chest. She smiled, brightly, and jumped to her feet. Issei-kun. Let's go to the park and play superheroes one more time, shouted Irina, happily. I smiled and nodded in agreement before we both ran out. We went and got our respective mothers and went over to the park to play, and on the way I received a massive headache. Ever since Office sent me and Drake back in time, I've been getting short headaches. The only explanation I could come up with was that it was a rebound effect and I just left it at that. Irina and I arrived at the park and played for more than 10 minutes before she excused herself to drink water. I leaned against the swing set as I waited for her and jumped when I heard the swing suddenly squeak as it moved. When I turned to look at it, my eyes widened and I couldn't believe who was sitting on the swing. Hello, Issei, said a familiar, monotone voice. Oh, Office. I shouted, surprised. Life point 2. Oh, Office. I said in shock. Said Dragon God continued to swing on the swing set as if it was completely normal for her to be there. Happy to see you again, Issei. It seems the spell did work, said Office in her usual monotone voice. Sorry about sending you back an extra year. The spell wasn't stable enough. It's alright, I'm just glad it worked at all, I said, relieved to see the little dragon god. How is your connection with Drake? Because of the fact that you hadn't connected with him until later on, I was worried you might not be able to communicate with him, said Office, curiously. I'm here, Office. Issei came back with all his memories, as well as my own, intact, said Drake, reassuringly. Office nodded and continued to swing back and forth. Well, not that it bothers me or anything, but what exactly are you doing here, Office? I asked, curiously. Office stopped her swinging and looked at me with a puzzled expression. Obviously I came to explain the effects of the time-traveling spell, said Office as if it obvious. One of the rebound effects is going to manifest as headaches for you. Headaches? Ah. So that's why I've been getting so many of them. Issei-kun, called a familiar voice. I spun around and saw Irina in the distance, using her hands as a megaphone so I could hear her better. Office, do you want to come back with me to say hi to Irina? I asked, curiously. Office responded with a simple no and Irina called out to him again. Office, you know where my house is, right? We should meet up there. I do, however, Issei, something terrible has happened to your home, said Office, seriously but still in her monotone voice. Someone has replaced it with a shabby little two-story house. I suspect Great Red did it. We should dispose of him immediately. I couldn't help but roll my eyes at the dragon god's notion and sighed. I muttered out a just go and waded towards Irina, who was shouting at me to hurry up. After I reached her, Irina eyed me, quizzically. Issei-kun, who was that girl? Asked Irina, suspiciously. I jumped back, surprised by the angry expression on Irina's face, and laughed awkwardly. She's just a friend. She visited me a few days ago, I said in defense. Irina eyed me and then squinted. What day? She asked, causing me to sweat a bit. Today is Monday? Right? So, last Wednesday, I said, nervously, not wanting to incur the wrath of the little redhead. Irina thought for a moment and sighed. Last Wednesday, huh? I was out of town that day, said Irina in defeat. I smiled, happy I had pulled off my lie, until Irina frowned and her eyes became glassy. Issei-kun is going to replace me with that gothic Lolita skank. Skank. Did Irina just call Office a skank? Wah. She's really depressed now. Irina, I'm not replacing you with her. I'm sorry I didn't tell you about her before, I said, trying to make Irina feel better. I remember someone once told me that I should consider the girl's feelings, so I thought I'd try to make Irina feel better. Irina sniffled and muttered out a "you should have," and I patted her head in reassurance. Today's our last day together, let's not let this ruin it. Yeah, said Irina in her usual happy voice, as she knew I was right. Irina and I, as well as both our mothers, walked back to Irina's house, and I helped her pack up the rest of her stuff and take it down to the moving truck. Irina's parents were both ready in their car and were giving Issei and Irina a moment to say their final goodbyes. So, I said, unsure of what to say in this goodbye. Irina smiled at me, happy we were able to have a nice last day together. Hey Irina, stand still for a minute. Irina's face contorted in confusion, but she did as she was told, and I quickly leaned in to give her a kiss on her cheek. When I pulled away, Irina's eyes were wide and a bright blush streaked across her face. Issei-kun, stuttered Irina, shocked by my sudden action. I smiled at her and grabbed her hand. That was a goodbye present, so you won't forget me before we meet again, I said, happily. Irina merely stared at me before she was broken from her trance by her parents calling her. I released her and she ran to the car and waved to me from the window before they drove off to the airport to catch their flight to England. I walked into my room a little while after Irina left and looked around. Office was nowhere to be found, and I sighed. She must have gotten lost. I hopped onto my bed, not in the mood to search for the petty dragon god at the moment, and heard a distinct form underneath my bed. My eyebrow creased in confusion and I leaned over the side of my bed to peek underneath. There I found Office, rubbing her stomach, tenderly. She looked over at me and wore a satisfied smile. I've been hiding for almost 3 hours, said Office, victoriously. Oi, what kind of victory did you get for doing that? I was worried about you, you know. Get out of there, I said before rolling back onto my bed. Office slithered out from under my bed and then crawled on top of it and sitting down with her legs crossed. We stared at each other for a few moments and I deadpanned. Rebound effect. Ah, yes, said Office, calmly. I sighed in annoyance, but she continued as if nothing happened. Well, you have probably already seen the rebound effects of the spell. For example, the spell's instability sent you back an extra year. One of the other effects has to do with the people close to your heart. Oh, yeah, I remember you said that they might remember me. I said, energetically. Issei, you said you've been having headaches, right? Asked Office, receiving a nod from me in response. All right, well, I found out that there are 15 people who will remember you after certain things trigger their memory. So until that trigger is activated, they have no idea who you are. I kind of understood what Office meant by that. It was like their memories were locked in a safe and he needed to find the key to open it. I thought that, even though I was the spellcaster, wouldn't remember you immediately. However, it seems that wasn't the case, explained Office, relieving me a bit. At least she didn't have any problems. Generally, the way you know that someone remembers you is because you have a massive headache, which the person who remembers you also gets. So the fact that you had a headache means. Then someone remembered me? I said, suddenly, finally understanding what Office was talking about. She nodded and I began to think. Who in the world could have remembered me so quickly? Do you know who it is, Afais? No, said Afais, bluntly. However, issei, there is something you should know. Just because they were close to your heart doesn't mean that you had a positive relationship with them. One of the people who remembered you could be one of your enemies, and he may come and try to kill you while you are in a weakened state. I paled at her words. Cao, Shalba, the evil dragons, Cockabile, Rainare. All of them would have liked nothing more than to kill me. If any of them remembered while I was in this state. Issei, said Afais, breaking me from my thoughts. I'll protect you. Oh Afais. I said, confused. You and your friends protected me before, and I am going to return the favor, said Afais, seriously. I'll help too, partner, said Drake, making me look at my left arm. You, too, Drake. I said in disbelief. Of course, partner. We even have Ascalon to help us fight, said Drake. Oh yeah, of course. We have Ascalon, so that will help us. Wait, what? Wait, what? How do we still have Ascalon? I shouted in surprise. It came back with us since it was stored in the boosted gear, said Drake, as if it was obvious. Wow, I wish I had known that before. I hope I'd still be able to join Kendo. Anyways, we should probably rest. It's been tiring for both of us, said Afais, calmly. Yeah, I said. Afais crawled under the covers and I followed suit, both of us facing opposite directions. We quickly fell asleep afterward, and I realized that night that sleeping with Afais was going to be hard. This was because I found myself on the floor the next morning with a red foot mark on my back. Life Point 3. Michael's POV. Ah, heaven is so peaceful and beautiful, just as my Lord left it, I said as I sat at my desk and watched the screens that showed each of the levels of heaven. I then looked down at the stack of papers on my desk and sighed, knowing that it would take me at least 4 or 5 days of constant working to go through all of them. I was just about to go through another report when one of my messengers ran into my office. Michael-sama. It's terrible. Ascalon has vanished, shouted the messenger, causing me to jump from my seat. Excuse me. I said in shock. The holy sword that has the magnificent power of dragon slaying, Ascalon, was a very difficult sword since receiving it after St. George's death. It refused to be wielded by anyone, even myself, and it annoyed I and the other seraphs. Did you just say it disappeared? Why yes, my lord. The guardian of the sword came to us when the sword suddenly began to glow and we watched it vanish into thin air. We can't even seem to locate it, said the messenger. I slapped my hands to my face and groaned. Oh Lord! Why did you create such a strange and free-spirited sword? Michael-sama, do you think it's possible that Ascalon is with its new wielder? Its new wielder man have finally appeared. Yes, that may be a great possibility. We are unable to track a holy artifact if it merges with a person's spirit. We will have to wait until the person tries to wield it and track where they are then, I said, calmly. Another messenger ran in, looking even more distraught than the previous, and I sighed. What is it, Thomas? Michael-sama. It's the other seraphs. They require your assistance, shouted Thomas. My eyes widened and I created a magic circle behind me before I disappeared through it. I appeared on the other side of the magic circle and it faded away. I looked around and found myself in the 7th heaven where God's system was located. The clouds in this place were golden and the overall energy was so holy that if any unholy object or person walked into this place they would be destroyed instantaneously. What could they be doing here? Is something wrong with the system? I said before releasing my 12 golden wings and flying around in search of them. I found a small gazebo, where we usually met, very close by on a golden cloud, and found Gabriel, Uriel, and Raphael arguing about something. I flew down and landed on the steps of the gazebo before walking in. What's going on? Ah, Michael. Maybe you can talk some sense into them, said Uriel, annoyed. I looked at him with a confused expression and he stared at me. You couldn't have missed such an important thing, could you? The system is acting up. Pardon? What could possibly be causing it to act up? Asked Michael, shocked. We believe something on Earth has influenced the system. We are unsure exactly what has caused it, but believe someone or something has begun to awaken their powers. Whoever it is, though, is suppressing their powers, explained Raphael. Also, the system isn't in any danger, Michael, so relax. It's still running as per usual but with a very minor anomaly. I sighed in relief that my lord's system was safe and then remembered something Uriel said when I first arrived. What exactly is the problem then? If we are unable to locate the cause of the anomaly and it isn't having any kind of dangerous effects, then we should wait until said cause reveals itself, I said, wondering what they could be arguing about. See, I told you Michael would take my side. You're such a dummy, Uriel, said Gabriel in her usual upbeat attitude. I could see Uriel frown and cross his arms and sighed. I'm just saying, if there is someone or something that can have this kind of effect on the system, then they are a threat and should be dealt with, said Uriel, annoyed. Of course, but how per se do you expect to find them? If you would like to attempt to discover the cause of this anomaly, then please do so, Uriel, but do not let it affect your ability to perform your duties, I said, calmly. Uriel glanced at me and nodded. If all is settled, then I will return to my position in the fourth heaven to guard Eden, said Raphael before releasing his fiery 10 wings and disappearing in the distance. Uriel left to begin his search and Gabriel decided to follow me back to my office to talk about the present situations. Ascalon disappears and the system is having an anomaly. Why do I feel like this is connected? Rias POV. Surtsk Sama. Lady Grafia has gone into labor, shouted one of the servants after barging into my room while Issei and I were playing chess. Issei literally dropped his queen piece after hearing that, and it knocked a bunch of the pieces on the board over, some even falling to the floor. He all but leapt out of his seat, knocking it over, and squeaked out a high-pitched "What? Oi, don't get all panicky now. I told you to just relax and everything will go smoothly," said Suji-chan, Issei's knight, as he walked past the servant and into my room. Issei watched him walk over to him and smacked him on the back with a bright smile. "You should be more happy than anything. You're about to become a father. And you, little Rias, are about to become an auntie." "Ah, yes. I want to see my baby nephew after Issei says it's okay," I said, trying to hide the excitement I had for seeing my new baby nephew. I think I was as excited as Issei when we found out Oni-sama was pregnant. "Why hear that, Issei? If you don't go and see your newborn son and then tell little Rias here it's okay, you're gonna disappoint her," said Suji-chan after throwing an arm around Issei's neck. Issei visibly flinched at the thought of disappointing me and I sighed as he suddenly ran out of the room. Suji-chan gave me a thumbs up as he went after his king and I sighed before picking up the chess pieces and rearranging them on the board. I finished and walked out to ask one of the maids to please bring me a snack, and I climbed onto my bed before pulling out a book about the rating games. My father and Issei told me that I should start catching up on the ins and outs of the rating game so that when I can start participating in them I won't have any problems. As I did so, I could feel a kind of energy emanating from my drawer. I wondered what it could be and thought about what I had in that drawer. I had all sorts of little magical tools my Issei lent me since I always liked figuring out how they worked. I even almost blew up my room one time because I put too much demonic energy into one of the magical tools. It wasn't a fun experience having to explain it to mother and father. I thought some more about what I had in that drawer and remembered that I had put my evil pieces in there until I needed them. I rolled to the edge of my bed and opened the door to see that the pouch I had them in was glowing. My forehead scrunched up in my confusion and I picked up the bag before carefully opening it. My evil pieces all suddenly flew out of the bag and began to float around me in a circle. I could clearly see my queen piece in front of me and picked it out of the air with no resistance before putting it back in the pouch. I did the same thing with my 2 rooks, bishops, and knights. I didn't find anything odd until I reached my pawn pieces. Firstly, 4 of them were glowing a dull red, the way they do when they resonate with a person's soul before they enter the person's body. The other 4, though, were glowing a very bright crimson, one that might even put my hair to shame. Those 4 pieces also had red sparks coming off of them and I decided against trying to touch them for the moment. Instead, I reached out to the dull glowing pieces and tried to pull it out of the air. I tugged and it didn't budge at all and I became confused. When it refused to move after another budge, I stood up on my bed and began to yank it hard, finally getting it to budge a bit. After several more budges, though, the red sparks on the crimson glowing pieces turned into lightning and shot through all the pieces, connecting them in a ring of lightning and startling me. I ended up falling down onto the bed and gasped when I saw what my pawns were doing. They formed a ring and began to spin around me at high speed, releasing lightning as they did so and causing small fires on my bed sheets and drapery. They finally stopped, suddenly, and their glow dimmed significantly before falling down onto my bed as if nothing had happened. I looked down at the pieces, shocked by what had just occurred, and could do nothing but stare. "Rias-sama, I've brought you your "Oh dear me, what's going on in here," shouted the maid who I had asked to bring me food. She ran over to my dresser and dropped the tray down before using water spells to douse the flames on my bed and drapery. Ria-sama, what happened? I don't know, I said, still shocked. The maid saw me looking at my pawn pieces, which were still faintly glowing, and she turned and began to walk towards the door. I'm going to inform Grammary-sama. He may want to call Muajuka-sama, said the maid as she exited my room. I picked up all of my pawns and looked at them, wondering what this strange and nostalgic feeling I was getting from them was. As I held them, I felt so safe and secure and I couldn't understand why. What was going on with my pawns? Life point 4. Issei POV. Ah. It's such a nice day, I said, happily, as I walked outside. The air was clean and the sky was clear on this summer day. Absolutely perfect for a date. Stop being so happy. It's strange, said Off-Eyes as she continued to play on her, my, Game Boy. Also, where are you going? You know where I'm going, Off-Eyes, I said, not understanding why she would ask when I had just told her the night prior. It took her a moment and then she said an elongated ah in her usual monotone voice, not looking away from the game's screen. I rolled my eyes at her and, as I continued to get ready for my date, I remembered these last 3 years. 3 years since I was given a second chance at life by Off-Eyes. So much has changed and I understood what exactly our situation was like. 3 years ago. Issei, there are more rebound effects for you to know about, said Off-Eyes, calmly. I looked at her, confused, and she continued on. First of all, I have been split in two. I'm not sure why but I do know that my other half lacks the memories of you that I have. What? So then what is going to happen? Is the other half going to start up the Cows Brigade as if nothing happened? I asked, shocked. Off-Eyes nodded and I sighed. Poor other Off-Eyes. She is probably feeling so lonely like Off-Eyes did before I became her friend. Issei, said Off-Eyes, snapping me out of my thoughts. I want to give you something. Off-Eyes took my hand and placed a ring in it before I could ask what she was going to give me. She then spoke before I could ask what it was. That ring was given to Sir Lancelot by his foster mother, the Lady of the Lake. It is a ring called the Ring of Dispel and, as the name suggests, can dispel things like enchantments. It can also dispel auras by suppressing their power, hence your boosted gear. This will protect you from being found out by any of your enemies that don't remember you, explained Off-Eyes. I looked at the golden ring with a small clear white gem on it with interest. Such a small thing could suppress the huge power of the boosted gear. It was kinda cool. Then a question popped into my head. Wait, how did you get this ring, exactly? I asked, curious. I took it when Lancelot died, said Off-Eyes, simply. I sweat dropped and stared at her. So you stole it? I asked, rhetorically. Well, he was dead. He wasn't going to use it, said Off-Eyes in defense. I muttered out that doesn't make it any better, and sighed. Anyways, there's another rebound effect that I am aware of. It has to do with people who were close to you but not of the chosen 15. Ah, is there a possibility they might have some memories of me too? I asked, hopefully. No, said Off-Eyes, simply, causing me to sigh in disappointment. Instead, they will feel certain emotions based on how they were in relation to you. For example, if your master saw you, she might feel love or compassion towards you whereas someone like Shulba would feel fear or anger. This means you will have to be careful when you see your enemies because they won't underestimate you like they did before. Damn. I said, kind of annoyed. One of the ways I defeated all those enemies was because of how much they underestimated me. It's just gonna be a lot harder now, isn't it? Back to the present. I was now on my way to a shrine in my town to see a familiar person. "Issei," shouted a familiar voice, bringing me from my thoughts and making me realize I had passed my destination. I stopped my bike and turned around to see I had just passed the entrance to the shrine. I backtracked and stopped in front of it to find a familiar girl with a familiar face. Well, enough with the familiars. "Hey, Akeno," I said, a bright smile on my face as I waved to her. "Yufufu, were you so distracted that you didn't know where you were?" asked Akeno, giggling to herself. I blushed, embarrassed that I had done such a thing, but she didn't seem to mind much and invited me in. I had come to see Akeno around 2 months after I was properly settled in being brought back in time. I started martial arts training, even passing by the kendo club in my school every once in a while to watch. When I came to see Akeno, It turns out that she was really shy when she was little. She ended up opening up to me after a little while, but it was really surprising to see Akeno being so introverted. Well, that's in the past now. Ah, issei-kun, how are you doing today? Asked a gruff-looking man. It was Burikil, his wings hidden of course. Akeno told me you had a little tournament not long ago. How'd you do? Very good, sir. The training you gave me helped a lot, I said, happily. Burikil chuckled a bit and patted me on the head. That's good, that's good. If I had more time I'd teach you more. By the way, sir seems so formal. Why don't you just call me father, said Burikil, causing Akeno to turn beet red. Father. Stop it, shouted Akeno before pounding her fists against her father, said man merely laughing in response. When Akeno finished her assault, she pouted before turning to me. Issei, I have to change before we go, so please wait a moment. I nodded and Burikil and I watched her run off towards the shrine building. Say, Issei-kun, began Burikil, not taking his eyes off of the door his daughter disappeared behind. Can I ask what you think of Akeno? What do I think? Well, Akeno's very nice and I care about her a lot, I said, without any doubt. That's good, said Burikil, quietly. Now, this might be a bit pretentious of me, but can I ask you to please take care of her? I won't always be around and she could use someone sturdy like you. I smiled at him after processing his words and nodded. You don't even need to ask, I said, happily. Burikil grinned at me and we both turned when we heard Akeno calling him out. Father, I hope you are not saying anything embarrassing again, scolded Akeno, causing Burikil to burst out into laughter. Now, honey, I promise I won't embarrass you again. Take care of her, Issei-kun, she's quite a handful, said Burikil, laughing, as he walked off. After he was gone, Akeno caught my attention and she had her hands behind her, a slight tinge of red on her cheeks. Well, how do I look? She asked. I gave her a once-over and I couldn't help but do a double take and widen my eyes. She was beautiful. She was in a pale yellow sundress that ended just above her knees and she was wearing a big straw hat with a sunflower attached to it. Her hair was also down and I couldn't believe she had changed so quickly. Why Yuri, beautiful, I said, a bit embarrassed to say it out loud. She blushed again and smiled at my words and we stood in silence for a few moments. Well, we should probably get going. Why yeah, she said before we both left to get my bike and head off to town. Akeno and I had gotten to downtown around 30 minutes later and were currently in a clothing shop. Akeno, are you almost done trying on clothes? I asked, tired of waiting for almost 20 minutes for the girl to try on clothes she liked. Yufufu, Issei, would you like to come in and help me try them on? Asked Akeno after poking her head out from behind the curtain. The thought of helping Akeno change, touching her maturing body and the small curves which will develop into beautiful curves later on, just the thought is getting me so excited. Issei. Seems you have a bit of a nosebleed. Were you thinking something naughty? I tensed a bit, surprised she caught me so easily, and she proceeded to yank me into the changing room. Akeno, I can't be in here, I said, nervously, not wanting us to get kicked out of the store. When I turned to look at Akeno, she was in nothing but a bra and panties and I couldn't help but nosebleed, hard, and fly back into the wall before falling to the ground. Akeno pulled out a handkerchief and straddled my hips, still in nothing but her underwear, and grinned at me. Yufufu, Issei is so perverted. I wonder if I should keep teasing him, said Akeno, causing me to nosebleed a bit more. Oh no. I accidentally activated her S mode and now she will probably keep playing with me until we get caught. Miss, are you alright? We heard a loud thump, said one of the sales girls from outside the room. Akeno's eyes widened a bit as she probably didn't want me to get in trouble for being in here with her. Yes, I just tripped but I'm alright, said Akeno as she put on her sundress. The sales girl muttered out an alright and I could see her shadow walking away from the room. Issei, we should probably go. What about a dress? I asked, kind of said she wanted to just leave without getting anything. I felt bad because I thought it might have been my fault. Akeno looked at me for a moment, smiled before placing a kiss on my cheek. Don't worry, you didn't ruin anything. I didn't like how I looked in these dresses. Though I might model them for you sometime if you like, said Akeno, winking at me. I had to hold back a nosebleed so that we could properly escape from the store without being seen coming out of the same changing room. We managed to get out just fine and decided to look for a place to get some food. I think a W.C. Donald's would do, but we couldn't seem to find any. As we walked, we passed an alleyway and could clearly see 3 punks, maybe a few years older than us, smoking in it. They looked over at Akeno with creepy eyes, and I glared at them and grabbed Akeno's hand in an attempt to keep her with me as I increased my pace. Before we could get any more than a couple yards from the alleyway, I could feel a yank on my grip of Akeno's hand and spun around. One of the punks had grabbed Akeno's other arm and had stopped her from being able to continue with me. "Hey, little cutie. Are you on a date with this little dumbass?" asked the punk who was grabbing her. She stared at him in surprise and attempted to pull her arm from his grasp to no avail. After a few moments of silence, he growled, "Hey, I'm talking to you." The punk yanked her from my grasp and dragged her over to the alleyway with the other 2 punks. "Issei," shouted Akeno, stretching her free arm out to me. I ran into the alleyway after her, and one of the punks had been waiting around the corner and kneed me, causing me to drop to the ground, clutching my stomach. "Issei, no. Shut the hell up," shouted one of the punks before striking Akeno across the head. Said girl fell to the ground and clutched her head in pain, a little bit of blood dripping down her forehead. "Partner," said Drake, knowing what I was about to do. I didn't hear him, though, because I was absolutely livid. I got up and the punks looked over at me, probably ready to attack me. They wouldn't have a chance, though. I removed my ring of dispel and shoved it into my pocket before releasing my boosted gear. Issei had been helping me increase my energy reserves so that I could release it, and by now I could use it just like when I became a devil. Boost. "The fuck is that?" asked one of the punks, surprised by the sudden appearance of my boosted gear. "Boost. The real question is, where is that voice coming from?" asked one of the other punks. The punks all stared at me and I glared at them, causing them to stagger back a bit at the amount of pressure I was exerting. "Issei," said Akeno, her face looking confused. "What are you 2 doing?" "Get him," shouted the punk that was standing next to Akeno. The 2 punks closer to me hesitated for a moment before running over to me and attempting to punch me. I quickly ducked underneath their punches and smashed both my fists into their stomachs, launching them into the walls of the alleyway. The last punk stared at me, shocked, and I continued to glare at him. What the hell are you?" "It doesn't matter. You hurt Akeno and you won't get away from here in one piece," I said, angrily. I suddenly felt a powerful headache and it dissipated several moments later. "Yufufu," both I and the punk heard. "Oh Issei, you've shown me your good side again." Akeno got up to her feet and released her fallen angel wings, a sadistic smile on her face. "Hey Akeno," I said, surprised. Did she finally remember me? "Yufufu, I've missed seeing this side of you, Issei. It gets me so hot," said Akeno as she rubbed her lips with index and middle finger. Fuck this. "You 2 are monsters or something," shouted the punk who was still conscious. He began to run away from us, further down the alley, and Akeno looked over at him. "Yufufu, that's so cute. You think you are going to escape," said Akeno as she created lightning in her hand. She shot the lightning at the punk, shocking him until he collapsed on the ground, spirals in his eyes. I sweat dropped as I watch Akeno gush over how the punk looked when she shocked him, and I couldn't help but chuckle. Well, today has been an interesting day. Life.5. Akeno and I left that alley just after she finished gushing about electrocuting that punk, and we finally found that W.C. Donald's that we had been searching for earlier. We ordered some food and sat down at one of the booths in the back so we could talk in peace. "So, Akeno, I'm sure you noticed that we're kids," I began, causing Akeno to hum a yes before taking another bite of her burger. "Well, the reason why is because I basically died, and Issei brought us back in time." I said died awkwardly because I thought it would upset Akeno, and boy was I right. The moment the sentence ended I saw Akeno's eyes widen and she dropped her burger onto the table, not even bothering to close her mouth. I said her name a couple times to snap her out of it, and, after receiving practically no response, I reached across the table and grabbed both of Akeno's hands in my own. "Akeno, I'm alive and well. Please relax," I said, trying to bring her back. She blinked her eyes a few times before relaxing her body and tightly gripping my hands. "So you actually died, fighting Shulba," said Akeno, her eyes becoming glassy. "Please relax, Akeno. I'm okay now and I'm not going to let that happen again." "Don't worry, I'll always be here," I said, seriously. I had noticed it as the girls got closer to me, that I was slowly becoming a pillar of support for them. For Akeno, This was especially true, especially when Akeno was trying to reconnect with her father. After her mother's death, her mind was actually really unstable and I ended up becoming one of the only things that could keep her even relatively stable. I can't imagine how she would be if I actually did die. Akeno took a breath and relaxed before smiling at me. I released her hands, well at least one, and set them down atop the table. Sorry, issei. Anyways, why did Off-Eyes send you back so far? I thought she would just send you back a little bit of time before that happened, said Akeno, probably to change the subject. Well, she thought it would be better if I started training hard before I became a devil. That way I would already have big reserves when I get reincarnated. Things need to stay relatively the same based on everyone else's timelines, though, or it might cause problems, I explained, Akeno nodding in understanding. I then remembered something as I thought about the current situation and I frowned and looked away. Issei? What's wrong? Asked Akeno, worriedly. I glanced up at her and gripped her hand more tightly. Well, it's just that I'm really sorry, Akeno. You're going to have to go through such a difficult time again because of me, I said that she was going to have to deal with losing her mother for the second time. I glanced up at Akeno when she squeezed my hand and she was smiling, sadly, at me. It's alright, issei. You'll be there for me so I'll be okay, said Akeno as she looked over at me. Plus I'll have Rias to help me out too. Have you gone to see her yet? Huh? And no, she wouldn't remember me, plus she's in the underworld, I said, remembering my crimson-haired girlfriend. Akeno smiled, perversely, at me and I felt a chill run up my spine. Yufufu, so I get to have little issei all to myself? How? Said Akeno before sliding her fingers down her lips, sensually. Very for me? I said, trying to think of a way to steer this conversation from leading to some obscene, thought I wouldn't mind if it did. By the way, Akeno, normally to recover your memories, something had to have triggered it. Do you know what it was? I kind of remember. I remember seeing you release your boosted gear and I felt like I had seen it before but I wasn't quite sure. It was after you said that since they had hurt me that you were going to beat them that everything flooded in and I got a headache. The fact that you reacted such a way when I was in danger made my heart skip a beat just like every time you protected us, said Akeno, happily. I smiled at her, happy that she was happy to have her memories back, albeit it might not be the best since she will have to experience a horrible memory all over again. Now, we will have to make up for lost time, issei. I said, confused by what she was talking about. She looked at me lustfully and I gulped hard. After all, it's been 3 years without you experiencing my body issei and since Rias isn't here, I'm going to be completely unopposed, said Akeno as she stared at me, perversely. I gulped hard again as I thought about it and had to hold back a nosebleed at the thought and, damn it. Akeno was giggling at me and I'm almost certain I activated her S mode because she has an expression like she gets when she is going to tease me. We should probably leave before things get above PG because I know neither I nor Akeno will try to keep it at that level. Akeno ended up prodding me about everything that had happened so far and I explained everything from the different consequences of traveling back in time to what I've been doing in this time. She was pretty surprised when I told her Off-Eyes was living with me and she asked why my parents never notice her but I don't really understand it either. She said she used some spell to make herself invisible to them or something like that. As we spoke, we talked about what we were going to do about Rias and the others and I told her that she was going to need to go with Rias just as before. Afterward, I began thinking about Rias as well. How is she doing, I wonder? Rias POV. I'm sorry, Rias. Your pawn pieces are more peculiar than I could have imagined, said Beelzebub-sama. As he said this, his eyes clouded with a mix of annoyed confusion and curious. He handed me a small pouch which I assumed contained my pawn pieces. It's been almost a month since my pawn pieces had reacted in such a way and I've been kind of worried. As soon as the maid had my father contact Beelzebub-sama, he came and took them. I was hoping he would come back with good news but it seems not. What is happening with my little sister's pieces, Ajuka? Asked Unii-sama. He had my new baby cousin, Milikas, in his arms and was rocking him as he slept. My Unii-sama ended up not being informed about my pawn pieces until a week later because my father thought it would be better for him to focus on Oni-sama and Milikas. When he did find out, he was very mad at father for hiding it from him but he let it go when I told him nothing happened to me. Well, It seems that 4 of the pieces transformed into mutation pieces, said Beelzebub-sama, calmly. My Oni-sama-'s eyes widened and he had to stop himself from jumping up. Half of them. How could that even happen? Asked Oni-sama, visibly flustered by the information. Do you think that's bad, Sir Tsuks? It isn't, actually. There is something else, said Beelzebub-sama, grinning deviously at Oni-sama. Oni-sama leaned forward in interest and Beelzebub-sama continued. Every single pawn is owned. Oni-sama's and my mouth both dropped open and I leapt up from where I was seated. They're already owned. I shouted in disbelief. Beelzebub-sama grinned and nodded and I stared, wide-eyed. How is that even possible? Who could own them when I haven't even gotten any peerage yet? I'm not sure, but that does explain the reaction they had. The lightning was a combination of transforming into mutation pieces and the excitement of the energy in the evil pieces of being used in a reincarnation. The fact that they did so means that they are and, when I attempted to use one to reincarnate an animal, it completely rejected even me, their creator, from using them. Whoever owns these pieces is very powerful and has a tremendous potential. Possibly one that could be Mu class or higher, explained Beelzebub-sama. Oni-sama and I gaped at the thought and I could help but wonder who in the world could be my pawn. My one and only pawn. I could see someone in my head, his face unrecognizable, and I wondered who it was. And why I felt so happy when I remembered him. This situation is so strange and frustrating. As I was internally conflicting with this man who I didn't recognize, I felt a heat coming from the pouch with my pawns. I squeaked before looking down at the pouch. It was on fire. I quickly began to try and pat out the fire and put it out before pulling my pawn pieces from the slightly charred pouch. Rias, are you alright? Asked Oni-sama, who had witnessed the sudden combustion. I'm alright, Oni-sama, but my pawn pieces are acting up again, I said as I looked at my pawn pieces. I was holding one of the mutated pawn pieces in my hand and it was glowing and releasing small red lightning. Rias, please be careful. You could injure yourself, said Oni-sama after walking up to me. She attempted to take the pawn piece from my hand before the lightning hurt me, but I quickly spun around and ran away from her and towards Oni-sama. Oni-sama, wait. It doesn't hurt me, I said before looking up at her. She was staring at me confused and then down at the piece in my hand that was shooting little red lightning at my hand. It was clearly not burning or damaging my hand and she put on a confused expression. Could it not be hurting you because of the feelings of the owner, said Beelzebub-sama, attracting me to him. Before I could ask what he meant, he answered my question. There is a rumor that the powers attained from and based off of evil pieces do not affect people who the owner of said evil pieces has very strong affection for. Essentially, if the owner is in love with someone, the pieces cannot harm them. I blushed and looked down at my pawn, embarrassed that the owner of my pawn pieces might be in love with me and I didn't even know his name. I was snapped from my trance when I heard skidding on the ground and looked up to see Oni-sama standing in front of Beelzebub-sama, and Oni-sama had a shocked look in her eyes as she found Milikas in her arms. What do you mean, Ajuka? Someone is in love with my sweet little sister. Who is it? I need to teach them a lesson, said Oni-sama, fire in his eyes. Beelzebub-sama's sweat dropped, as did I and Oni-sama, and we just chose to ignore him. Sometimes Oni-sama can be so stupid. Aside from that, though, I'm still curious, actually more so than before. 4 of my pawn pieces were mutated and all 8 are owned. On top of that,